Good afternoon everyone, my name's Eleanor Laughlin, I'm the Student Study Skills Coordinator. We're here for about 45 minutes and what I'm going to look at today are just some of the key things that you need to think about in terms of how to improve your academic performance or ensure that that you're working to your maximum capacity. Can I just ask, are you all first years? No. Who's a second year? Second year, third years? Yeah, for some of you this will be recap, some parts of it, but it's sort of looking at the whole process and thinking, what are key things to tease out. For those of you starting out in particular, it is so important to first of all check all the regulations. Check the course regulations, the handbooks, the degree regulations. So often problems arise because people haven't referred back to these. Now, I would say that when your departments are putting courses together, these days they have to produce very extensive paperwork that outlines how you're going to be assessed, when you're going to be assessed, the assessment criteria. All these things should be in the handbook. And I would really encourage you to have a look at the assessment criteria in particular, because these are the criteria against which your work is marked. Now, if you're in the second or third year, maybe moving into different departments, or you're starting to work on your dissertations, go back to the handbooks relevant to the new department or the dissertation, because you will find that the assessment criteria are not uniform across the university, across departments even, or for different sorts of work. So it is really important that you make use of these resources. I'll give you a set of these slides at the end of the session today, but what I would ask, if you don't mind, so we know who's been here, if you could just write your name and your username, your DAC0EL or whatever it is number on there, and then we can let the college know that you've attended. So, what we want to think about, starting at one of the key things we all do is reading and making notes. It's so easy to get bogged down in the process. You have these very, very long reading lists, and what exactly do I write down? What are the things I need to be making notes of? One of the problems with a reading list is that it can promote a sort of passive reading. And what the passive reader will do is take the list and then start at the top of the list. So I'm going to read everything. So find that book and start reading. And what the passive reader will often do then is, in the course of reading that book, from the beginning to the end, they'll maybe find a reference that looks interesting and think, oh, I'll go and find that. And before you know it, you've gone off on a tangent and you've found some different resources, some different articles, some different material. But in fact, by the end of the day, you've gone so far down this line that you've really completed the first thing on your reading list. So, my first question to you is, how do you deal with reading lists? And what I've got here is just a copy of a part of a reading list from the geography department. If you could maybe share one between two, there might be enough for one. Some of you, this might actually be a reading list that you've actually had to deal with. So, looking at that list, what are the things that you would be looking for to determine where you start with this. Of course, it's dependent upon precisely what you're reading for, but say you're looking for things that are going to give you a good overview, or are going to be good solid texts in the subject. Where are the sorts of places you might start? Yeah.
I mean, it's whether you want to look at sort of electronic resources, whether you want to go to the library that day or not, in my eyes. Like, if you're going to do your reading and you want to stay at home, I would probably go for one of the e-books out of preference at that point.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and increasingly the resources are available online, and sometimes there's a bit of a compromise there. The best resource might actually be a physical book that's in the library, but if that's going to take you 20 minutes to get there, 20 minutes to get back, and you've only got an hour and a half, you're probably better going for an electronic resource and seeing what you can get from that first of all. What other factors would influence what you would choose on a reading list? Yeah.
It depends, I suppose, how quickly you want to read the text. So if you like look at the date when they were written, if they were written in like the 30s or the 40s, you might be quite antiquated language and quite difficult to read. So you might go for a more like modern article if you want to sort of like an overview, because it's easier and easier.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd say go for recent, even if it's not just the language, but go for recent in terms of how academia works. The academic process is not a series of academics working independently. They all build on each other's work. To establish yourself as an academic, you have to not only come up with great ideas, but show how your great ideas build on the great ideas that have gone before. So often in a book or an article, academics will sum up the key things that have gone before. So in reading something that's written this year or last year, you will usually find there is an element of summary, contextualising what they're saying in the broader context. So that gives you a nice potted account of what has happened in the subject so far. So going for recent, yes, it can be written in a more accessible manner, but also you'll often find it includes summaries. Also, if there's a particular author, and there's one person here whose name appears twice, Patrick Bond. He's an editor and he's written section. Is it Patrick Bond? You have to take it from me. Patrick Bond is also a section author on one of the other things listed there. So if somebody's name is cropping up time and time again, there is an inclination to think, right, well, I'll start by reading the earliest stuff first and work forward. Don't do that. Read the latest stuff first, because they often summarise their points as well. So think strategically in that way. Look carefully and think about, how much of the how much of this huge book am I expected to read. If it's only a few pages, if the lecturer has gone to the trouble of identifying a particular chapter, then that's a strong suggestion that that's an important text, and it's probably worth having a look at. Now, in terms of how you make these decisions, I just want to show you this. Again, if you want to take one, this should be enough for one per person, or one per two. Now, this is actually a book review of the first book listed on the bibliography. Are there enough going back there? Can everyone see at least? Yeah. Just have a look through this. I'd suggest you just read the first sentence of each paragraph. Don't read the whole text. Just have a quick look through, just to get a gist of what this book review is saying. As I say, just read the first sentence of each paragraph. So just looking at that, what does that tell you about the level this book's pitched at? Would it be useful for somebody who's just starting out? We've got some nods. What makes you think it would be, Rich? Yeah.
It says it includes sort of historical background,
Hmm.
a certain system.
So, for readers relatively unfamiliar with the conventions of international relations theory, and it outlines what it got. And then it goes on to say that it doesn't just explore at that level, but it goes deeper. So, the great thing about these book reviews is that take you a couple of minutes to glance through that. That's a lot quicker than skimming through a book, even looking for whether or not it's going to be useful. And most of the books, the academic books that will be on your reading list, you will through Google Scholar or through the actual journals. You can see this is Africa Studies Quarterly. You'll be able to find book reviews. And they're a great indication of whether or not the book is going to cover what you need and if it's going to be covering it at the level that's right for your needs. Look at abstracts, look at indexes, look at keywords. All these things are so important in helping you decide whether or not you need to read something. So avoid this. Don't think I'm going to read everything. There's no point. There really isn't any point in reading everything. Everything is there. It's almost like a smorgasbord, and it's up to you to decide what and when you need the different texts. So be selective, plan out what you're going to read, do a little bit of digging, find out about the text, prioritise them, and then focus on them. You'll find it saves you time, but it also is easier to concentrate and stay motivated. If you do find yourself dozing off, it's often because you're reading stuff that isn't actually incredibly useful to what it is you're trying to do. So think carefully about what you read. Now, many of you will know this, but just to emphasise the importance of the library in supporting your studies. And I would strongly encourage you to have a look at the library's page relating to your subject area. It includes a whole range of search engines and resources that focus on your subject area, and these are kept up to date by the liaison librarians. Each department has a liaison librarian. They might very well have come to your department, you might have met them, but as an individual, you can contact the liaison librarian and ask their advice. So if you've spent a couple of hours trying to find something and you can't find it, I would strongly suggest just drop the liaison librarian an email and say, where would you suggest I look for this or that? Make an appointment to go and see them. They're very, very keen to work with people. Groups, say if you're working on a project as well. Any questions about that? Now, I've said about the importance of making notes, and for me, this quote sums up what good notes should be. Sometimes it's a good idea to maybe photocopy something, go through with a highlighter, annotate it, but whatever you do, it shouldn't just be the original text. Because even if you photocopy a couple of pages and think, oh, this is really valuable, I can guarantee that 2 days later you go back to it and you can't remember why those 2 pages are really valuable. Make notes about why things are valuable. Highlight the things that are particularly important. The text won't go away, so you can go back to it again later if you need. But really focus on what is the information you need now. And don't get into the habit of copying out great chunks of text. And in terms of how you manage your notes, Plagiarism is something, you know, that we often talk about as university as something to avoid, and 9 times out of 10, plagiarism isn't intentional. It's because people have made this sort of mistake. So they've maybe read something interesting, made notes, and then not realised when they've come to write it up that what they made notes on is literally quoted. So what you need to be very careful about is make sure you paraphrase or you include quotation marks and you include references. So don't think, I'll remember where I got this, you won't. Get into the habit of including references. And I should say, as you go through and you're writing longer and longer pieces, by the time you get to your dissertations, you will find that you are dealing with many, many texts, many references, so it's a good idea to get into good habits now. Does anyone use EndNote or Zotero for referencing? No. Well, just to say, there are 2 types of software that you can use for managing references. And Zotero's free, and EndNote is one that's on the university computers. You might not need them, you probably won't need them, but if you are in a subject area where you are dealing with a lot of references, then it might be a useful tool to look into. And I know that CIS are running workshops on both of these in November, December. So you could find out more about them if you wanted. I'll show you where you can find the links to that later. Any questions so far? Okay. Ask you a question. What's the hardest thing about preparing a piece of work? The moment you get the title to the moment you hand it in, what's the hardest thing? Might vary. Yes?
Starting.
Getting started, yes. Yes. And it's so easy to procrastinate. So, in getting started, what do we need to do? You need to, first of all, break it down. And break it down into chunks of activity. So stop thinking about the 10,000 word essay, the 5,000 word essay. Start thinking about what's the reading you need to do, what are the notes you need to take, what's the research you need to do, when are you going to start writing, and map out this process in little doable chunks that you can timetable and stick to it. Because if you focus just on this big end product, you're not going to get started until it's very late in the day and you'll maybe end up working through the night, several nights. It's not the best way to work. So plan ahead, map things out and get started well in advance. And something that people often do is they fail to start writing. Now, I don't mean making notes, I mean actually pulling it all together. When you write up a piece of work, that's when you really start to work with the ideas, the theories, when your critical thinking comes to the fore, the reflection. So it's important that as you're making notes, start writing, start mapping out the structure of that piece of work. Start writing the easy bits. You may have a conclusion in mind, you may have part of the introduction, you may have historical background or context or anything. Start writing. Yeah, writing is best done in small chunks rather than this big writing binge at the end of a piece of work. And timetable in the time to write, as I say. Actually block it out in your diaries. And if writing's something you find hard to get started with, you can do things like using free writing. Is anyone familiar with free writing? Just make sure I've got any copies of this. be enough for that. There's some there. Okay, so what's free writing? The idea with free writing is it's sort of like warming up. It's a writing warm-up exercise, and just as you wouldn't run a marathon without warming up, so really writing is a difficult thing to do. So it's a good idea to actually get into the process of writing before you start writing your work. And it's a simple exercise. You write for 5 minutes. That's all, just 5 minutes. Set a timer. And you write without stopping. You write in sentences, but it doesn't have to make a whole load of sense. So you're not writing and reviewing and rewriting. You're just writing non-stop in a sort of unstructured way. And the prompt you use for starting writing can vary, but I've suggested some of the following, and you'll see that some are about, you know, what are the things that interest you, what are the things that sort of capture your interest, but some are useful if you're in a bad place, in that, you know, you can't think where to start writing, or I don't understand this, or I'm feeling stuck. So it's about writing about the writing process in some instances. Now, often what happens when you do this is that in the process of writing about the issues, you actually solve the issues and you figure out a way into getting started with what it is you need to write. Or say you've gone for the books papers that I've most enjoyed reading are, it may be that you start writing and you think, actually, what I'm writing here is what I need to expand on in part of my essay. So sometimes you can incorporate that free writing into the finished piece. But even if that's not the case, it's still a very valuable process to get you started with writing. Any questions about that or writing? Here we are. What I want to think about now then is feedback. Feedback, oh sorry, I missed some points. Setting yourself writing goals and plans, which I identified. Deadlines and commitments to other people to keep you on track. These are key, aren't they? If you think the reason you write an essay is because you've got a deadline and it's going to be assessed. Can you set yourself interim deadlines? Can you, some tutors say, you know, if you'd like to send me a draft of your work or an outline by such a date, you can do. I would strongly advise you to take advantage of that if that's offered, because that will mean you'll get writing sooner. So commitments to other people are things that you're more likely to finish in a timely manner. So, feedback. It's very easy with feedback to, when you receive it, look at the grade and forget the rest. But it's so important to look beyond the grade. Why is that? Why is it so important to look beyond the grade you receive? Yeah.
The grade doesn't really tell you where you've gone wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's only when you read the text can you see where you've gone wrong or where you've done really well. Yeah. So what can that knowledge help you do? what should that knowledge help you do?
Work out where you've gone wrong to be able to work those areas.
Absolutely. It's really important to think of feedback as not the end of a process, but a stage in an ongoing process. Your writing through university will develop, and that's absolutely key, and it will happen. But if you think of feedback as something that's going to really help improve you more quickly than trial and error, then you'll find you progress. So you've got to think about feedback as part of this developmental process. Do you understand the feedback? I remember getting feedback sometimes as a student that I really did not understand at all, and it was only maybe a few months later that it sort of made sense. If you receive feedback like that, don't do what I did, which was just put it to one side and forget about it. Contact the tutor. Tutors and academics are always happy to provide additional information on the feedback they've given. So if you don't understand it, ask for clarification. And when you ask for clarification, be specific. Which are the sentences or the sections that you don't understand? Why don't you understand them? So they can help you understand. Feedback is not personal. It's not about you. It's about the work. Sometimes it may come across as a bit blunt, but that's not the intention. It's not meant to sting. It is there to help you develop. So don't take it personally. And as I say, feedback is really feed forward. I've got here some examples of feedback on introductions. This was another university that gave some academics some text to mark from the point of view of actually putting the feedback online to give their students an understanding of the sorts of things that come up in feedback. Are there a, should be two-sided, is it two-sided or not? Have you not? Oh, you've got the whole thing, yeah. Has everyone got, can everyone see a copy of that? Yeah, so I think for most of you it's printed as a two-sided, but you've got it as two separate sheets there, but it's the same thing. What we've got here is the sorts of feedback you will receive, and particularly the first example there, you can see, well, if you read it, it is a very well written introductory paragraph, and the teacher has been very complimentary, but the key things to pick out here, yeah, compliments are great, but what exactly is the student doing well? And if you look through, the tutor's comments are about the arguments and the criticality, the thoughtfulness, and I think this really sums up key things that they're looking for. And when I go round academic departments and say, you know, what are the skills that, particularly in the first year, people have really got to master and get to grips with, something that they all say is criticality. So they want you to become a critical thinker. So you're using the things you read but you're using them in a way where you're evaluating, you're making decisions, you're making points. So this is what they're looking for. You've got to be able to back up everything you say, but they're looking for that criticality. The second example there, less arts and humanities, more social science, and you'll see there that the person's sort of going through the initial paragraphs and saying what's good, what's not so good. When you get a situation like that, it's easier to read the what's good and just sort of skip over the what's not so good. But in fact, the most useful thing there is that the person has gone off on a tangent and really they need to stay focused on the subject of the essay. So those are the sorts of things to pick up. The final one is from the sciences, and you can see here the tutor has gone to the trouble of actually listing, what makes a good lab report in a way, and how you distinguish from your notes, your lab books, to actually what you write up, and suggests what you can and can't include. Now, it will vary from different disciplines, but this sort of feedback, when you get that sort of feedback, and very often at the beginning of a course, tutors give this quite general feedback on what a good lab report or a good essay looks like. Do take it to heart and use that almost as a template. It will really help you write in an appropriate way. Any questions about feedback? Seminars and tutorials. I want to say a lot about these, but I think the thing about them is that they bridge a gap. You have lectures where somebody's giving you information, telling you their view, their opinion. You've got your study time when you're working independently, where you're reading and writing, and seminars and tutorials bridge that gap. And increasingly in higher education, we recognise that conversation is a key part of learning. And it's so important that you take that opportunity in seminars and tutorials. If you're somebody who's reluctant to speak, then you really need to bite the bullet and start speaking. Set yourself a goal. I'm going to answer a simple question, or I'm going to sum something up. You don't have to wait until you've got that great comment, that earth-shattering discovery to say something. And if you look at the people in your tutorial seminar group, often those that speak the most aren't actually saying things that are unusual, but they're just voicing what you already know or are thinking. So you need to do that. Once you get into the habit of speaking in seminars and tutorials, you'll find it comes a lot more easy. Participation, though, is about listening as well. That's key. So if you're somebody, if you're honest with yourself, do you talk too much in seminars or tutorials? If you are, then step back, listen to what other people are saying more. Because what you get from other people speaking is a different slant on the same material. And when you take that in, you'll find your ideas develop more quickly as a result of it. So wherever you are on that spectrum, think carefully about how you participate. You must participate, but don't over-participate. Examinations. Something that does catch people out from time to time. You need to be available for the whole exam period. Things can change, things can move, things can be shifted around, and make sure that you do have all these things sorted in advance. Not going to stick with examinations, but past exam papers. Sure, those of you who second year and above will have used them, but for those of you in the first year, if you've not heard about them, the past exam papers are there online, and they give you a great source of material to help you revise for exams. Now this is probably a question that those of you in the third year and second year are in a good position to offer advice on. University is a roller coaster, so how do you deal with the downs, the periods when you're not feeling so great? What do you do? What do you do? Say you're having a bad week, you've been working on a piece of work, it's not coming together. What do you do? Yeah.
Step away from it for a day or something, because if you're really not happy doing it, then you're just going to get yourself more worked up, so just going to step back from it for a while, I suppose.
Don't know what that was, wasn't me. There was some phone over there. Yeah, absolutely, step back. Sometimes the temptation is to keep going and going, and sometimes you do. You need to keep pushing yourself to understand something or to get an idea or to grasp a concept. But you'll know when you're pushing yourself too much, when you need a break. And it's so important that you do step back. And talk to friends, use the wonderful support system within the colleges. What else might you do? Yeah.
It sounds weird, but I get out of Durham, or I get away from Durham for a bit.
Yeah.
So I might go home, or I might just sort of leave Durham City and go sort of outside of Durham and try and sort of forget about it for a few moments.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know, talk to your friends
Yeah.
who do the same thing, who are sort of going through the same thing as well.
Yeah. Even people in different subject areas, you can guarantee there'll be slumps for all of you at some point. So in dealing with the downs, yeah, step back, maybe physically step back, leave Durham for a bit. It can be a step back in terms of go for a swim, go for a walk, go drink coffee, whatever, but do take breaks and make sure that you do keep that work-life balance. Don't fall into the trap of thinking I've got to work hard, therefore I don't do sport or I don't see my friends. That's not how it should be. You should be balancing the different commitments and ensuring that you're looking after yourself in effect. So, what are the ways forward in terms of how you can further develop? I mean, this has just been highlighting a few things to think about in terms of your academic skills. You've got the wonderful SHAPE programme here, which offers all sorts of training and advice and support, and I'd really encourage you to take advantage of that. Centrally, we have an academic skills programme. If you go onto this and click on the IT skills, that will take you to more information about the Zotero and the EndNote training I mentioned. Information skills, there's a lot of information there about the library. Literacy skills, there's a lot in there about plagiarism and writing skills and the different workshops, how you can develop your writing skills. And just to flag up, if you are really struggling with your writing, maybe you've written a piece of work, you've got the feedback and you don't get it, you can make an appointment to see one of the advisors at the English Language Centre. You can take a piece of work in and they'll talk through it with you. So if you want impartial feedback from a writing point of view on your writing style, that can be very useful. There is a misconception that the English Language Centre is only for international students, but as they say, nobody's first language is academic English. And I think that's a key thing to bear in mind. Everyone finds academic English difficult to grasp, so make use of their support. So there's courses, resources. Anyone who's in the maths department, where's it gone? There we go. Anyone who's doing maths needs additional maths support. Just to flag up a new resource this year, Maths Lab. If you go online, you'll find that there are a whole load of resources there for maths. So say you're doing some statistical analysis and you're not sure which type of which analysis to conduct, then go on there and it'll point you in the right direction. There's a whole load of resources there. But you can also come to the drop-in sessions. So if you've got a particular piece of maths or statistics that you're struggling with, bring it along and one of the tutors will be able to talk that through with you and help you move forward with that. But before you know it, you'll be at this point, and it goes incredibly quickly. You talk to any graduate and they will tell you, oh, it just went so quickly. And if anyone's suggested, for those of you in the first year doesn't count, just getting the minimum, that's nonsense. The first year is about laying the foundations that will mean you can really hit the ground running in years 2 and 3 when the work is very intense. So this nonsense of first year doesn't count, not true. First year is key. It's your foundation year in a way. So, any questions? Yeah.
The maths lab that you started this year, is that for maths students in addition to those struggling with maths from other departments?
It's for everyone, yes. So maths students, I would say the majority of people that have come so far have been from the sciences or the social sciences, but we have had, say, a couple of historians who are having to do some quite basic stats but have not done stats before. So anyone at all. It can be, you can be maths student. The people who actually run it, the tutors, are PhD researchers who are specialising in maths or science or statistics. So they have that high level knowledge, and they also, many of them are teaching in departments as well, so they understand what it is, why you've been set certain things. So that's open to anyone. Any other questions? Yeah.
Like you talked about deadlines and stuff, but do you have any specific advice for if you have 3 essay deadlines in the same week? Because in November it's just nightmare.
Okay.
I'm in a really good fortnight, I have 5 the same deadlines.
Right. So when are these deadlines?
They're Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then following Tuesday.
Eek. And they're in November.
Yeah.
Are they later November?
Mid-November.
Mid-November. Right. So what you have to do is you take those deadlines and you think, right, okay, I've got those deadlines. You cannot leave working on those until then. So what you've got to do is think, right, I'm bringing those forward and you're going to timetable them, and I would suggest you start working on them now, even if it's some of the things you've maybe not had all the lectures on. You've still got the reading list. You can start to map out what shape those essays are going to be. So I would break each of them down, ask yourself, which of them are the ones I'm happiest starting with, but alternate them, mix them up, so you're not thinking, right, this week I do this one, this week I do this one, but you're actually thinking, right, this week I'm going to map a plan out for this one, I'm going to write an introduction for this one, I'm going to do some reading for this one, so you're mixing it up, so that as you go through, you're actually working on them all collectively and not leaving one to the last minute, because you'll be guaranteed that if you leave one to the last minute, that will be the one you have the most trouble with and you've no extra time. So I think you today map out those essays, and if anyone else is in that situation, that many essays that close together in November, you need a plan by the end of today and you need to start working on it in small chunks. I think that's the key thing with that, yeah.
What do you think about sort of prioritising your summatives over your formatives?
That's an interesting question, yeah. What do other people think? Prioritising? Yes, actually. Oh, sorry, I think we're... Okay. What do you think? Prioritise summatives over formatives? Yeah, I'm getting some nod in here. The fact of the matter is they're going to count, aren't they? The grade is going to count. So prioritise them, but those formatives are essential because they all feed into a summative in some way or other, whether that be an exam or another essay. So they are on the journey towards other summatives. So you absolutely need to concentrate on summatives, but assign time to formatives. Make sure you give them enough time and you really push yourself with the formative, and then when the summative comes along you'll be in a better place.